The rifle felt heavier than Clara remembered. Maybe it was the cold, maybe it was fear, or maybe 3 months alone had drained more strength from her arms than she wanted to admit. The knock came again, hard enough to rattle the whole cabin, and Clara raised the barrel toward the door. Outside, the Colorado wind screamed like a wounded animal, throwing snow against the walls as if it meant to tear the place apart. This was not a normal storm. This was the kind of blizzard people whispered about years later, the kind that buried homes and erased tracks and turned men into frozen statues. Clara Whitmore had survived many things in her 24 years. She had survived losing her parents to cholera when she was 16. She had survived being sold by her own aunt and uncle to a man 3 times her age, traded like livestock for security. She had survived 3 years married to Thomas Whitmore, a man who touched her like she was a debt to be collected, instead of a woman to be loved. But as the wind howled and the cabin shook, she was not sure she would survive this night. The fire in the hearth had burned down to dull red embers, throwing weak shadows across the rough pine walls. In the small room beside the kitchen, 12-year-old Jake Hartley slept in uneasy bursts, his cough echoing through the thin door. Jake was not her son by blood. He was the orphan child of Thomas's ranch hand, a man crushed beneath a fallen fence post last spring. Clara had taken the boy in without thinking, even though she barely had enough food for herself. Some choices were not choices at all. The knock came a 3rd time. Clara's eyes flicked to the cellar door in the corner. Beneath it, hidden in an old flour sack, lay $500 in cash. Thomas's money. She had found it a week after burying him in frozen ground behind the church in Silver Creek. She did not know where it came from, and a part of her never wanted to know. "Who is it?" she called, forcing strength into her voice. There was a pause, then a voice answered, deep and steady, carried through the storm like distant thunder. "Name's Silas Maddox. I'm not looking for trouble, ma'am. Just shelter from the storm." Clara did not lower the rifle. "There's a town 5 miles east," she said. "They have a hotel." 5 miles might as well be 50 in this weather, the man replied. His voice held no anger, only exhaustion. "My horse won't make it. I've got money. I'll pay to use your barn." Every lesson hard life had taught her screamed at her to say no. A woman alone did not invite strange men inside. That was how stories ended badly. Then Jake coughed again, a wet, rattling sound that made Clara's chest tighten. She could not afford a doctor. She could barely afford flour. And if she sent this man back into the storm to die, that weight would sit on her soul forever. "Step back from the door," she said. "I'm armed." "Yes, ma'am." She heard boots scrape against wood as he obeyed. Clara drew a breath, then another, and unlatched the door. The wind hit her first, stealing the air from her lungs. Then she saw him. The man on her porch was the largest human being she had ever seen. He had to be well over 6 feet, shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the storm behind him as snow clung to his coat and hat. Dark stubble covered his jaw. But it was his eyes that caught her. Gray, calm, watching her carefully from beneath the brim of his hat. Behind him stood a horse near collapse, steam rising from its flanks. Clara kept the rifle trained on his chest. "You're smaller than I expected," he said quietly. "The way you talked through that door, I thought you'd be 6 feet tall with a beard." Despite herself, Clara felt her lips twitch. "I'm tall enough to pull this trigger." "Yes, ma'am. I don't doubt it." He lifted his hands. They were massive, scarred, empty. "The barn's around back," Clara said after a long moment. "There's hay in the loft. You can stable your horse. You leave in the morning." Something shifted in his eyes. Surprise. Maybe gratitude. "Thank you," he said. "I'm in your debt." "It's Mrs. Whitmore," she replied, "and you can pay it by leaving." He nodded once and led his horse into the storm. Clara did not sleep that night. She sat by the window with the rifle across her lap, every creak of the cabin tightening her grip. But the stranger did not return. When gray dawn finally broke through the clouds, the storm had buried the world under drifts taller than her waist. She needed to check the animals. The walk to the barn was short, but the snow was deep and unforgiving. Halfway there, her boot caught on something hidden beneath the drift. Clara fell hard. The breath knocked from her lungs. The cold crept into her bones fast. Her limbs felt heavy. The snow no longer burned. It felt warm. That was when panic screamed through her fading thoughts. Then something lifted her. Strong arms wrapped around her, pulling her from the drift as if she weighed nothing. A deep voice cut through the fog, urgent and real. Heat surrounded her, not imagined warmth, but solid and alive. She was being carried. The last thing Clara felt before darkness took her was the steady rise and fall of a chest, broad enough to be a wall. When she woke, warmth pressed against her skin. Fire crackled nearby. Her feet burned as circulation returned, sharp and painful. "Easy," a low voice said. Her eyes flew open. She tried to push away, weak hands striking a chest like stone. "Don't touch me." He backed away instantly, hands raised. "You were freezing," he said. "I won't touch you now." Clara took in her surroundings. The barn, the stove, her boots drying nearby. The man from the storm stood a few steps away, but looking almost unsure of himself. "My boots," she said. "Over there. You shouldn't have been out in that weather." "I needed to check the animals." "They're fine," he said. "I fed them." That surprised her. "Why?" "You gave me shelter." The barn door banged open. "Ma!" Jake stood there, eyes wide, staring at the massive stranger. "I'm fine," Clara said quickly. "I just fell." Jake looked up at the man. "Are you a bad man?" The question landed heavy. Silas knelt, bringing himself level with the boy. "Used to be," he said honestly. "Trying not to be now." Jake nodded. "Ma says everyone deserves a chance." Silas glanced at Clara. Something softened in her eyes. She held out her hand. "Help me up." His grip was careful, gentle despite its strength. "Breakfast is in an hour," she said. "You can join us." Silas watched her walk away toward the cabin, something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Hope. Silas should have left the next morning. That was the plan. It had always been the plan. Ride out once the storm passed. Disappear into the wide places where names did not matter, and men like him were better forgotten. But plans had a way of breaking the moment you let people into them. 3 days passed. 3 days since the blizzard loosened its grip on the land, and Silas Maddox was still there. Clara told herself it was temporary. The roads were still rough, the drifts still deep. It made sense for him to stay a little longer. That was all. But each morning she woke to the sound of hammering, of wood splitting clean beneath an axe, of a deep voice humming low and steady as he worked. Each day, something broken was made whole. The fence no longer sagged. The roof no longer leaked. The barn door that had scraped and cursed her patience for months now swung smooth and easy. Silas did not ask permission. He did not ask. He simply worked. As if fixing her world was the most natural thing a man could do. Jake followed him everywhere. The boy watched Silas with open wonder, learning how to hold a knife without cutting himself, how to approach a horse so it would not spook, how to split wood with his weight instead of his arms. Silas never raised his voice, never rushed him. Clara noticed how careful he was, how he knelt instead of towering, how his massive hands moved slow and steady around small fingers. It unsettled her more than she liked, because monsters did not act like this. Maggie O'Brien rode out from Silver Creek on the fourth day, her wagon heavy with supplies Clara could not afford but desperately needed. Maggie was loud, sharp-tongued, and impossible to fool. She took one look at Silas on the roof and one look at Clara standing in the doorway, and smiled like a woman who had already figured out the ending. "He's handy," Maggie said, lighting a cigarette, "and big enough to scare off trouble." "He's a stranger," Clara replied. "Aren't we all at first?" Maggie told her what the town was saying. A big man had passed through weeks ago. Quiet, kept to himself, looked like someone running from something. Clara's stomach tightened. But Maggie shrugged. A man doesn't have to be good to choose to do good. That night, Clara invited Silas to stay for supper again. They ate by the fire. Beans, biscuits, salt pork. Simple food. Silas ate like a man who had known hunger and respected every bite. Jake talked nonstop. Clara listened. After the boy went to bed, the silence between them felt heavy and warm. "I should tell you something," Silas said finally. She looked at him. "I'm not a good man." She waited. "I've done things," he continued. "Things that would make you send me away, if you knew." "Then why stay?" she asked. "Because I'm tired of running from it." Clara studied his face, the scars, the tired eyes. She thought of Thomas, of cold hands and colder nights, of a marriage that felt like a sentence. "Stay until the road's clear," she said. "If you still want to tell me after that, I'll listen." Something loosened in Silas's chest. The next morning, a black carriage rolled up the dirt road like it owned the land. Clara recognized it instantly. Harlan Crane stepped down from the seat, dressed in white, too clean for the plains, his smile thin and practiced. Two armed men flanked him. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "my condolences." "They're late," Clara replied. Crane did not mind. He never did. He spoke of debts, $500, interest, papers. Silas watched from the fence, every muscle tight. "This land will cover the debt," Crane said smoothly, "water rights included." "This land is not for sale." Crane smiled. "Everything is for sale." Silas stepped forward then. "Well, the lady said no." Crane's eyes flicked to him, measuring, recognizing danger. "This does not concern you." "It does when you threaten a widow on her porch." The standoff stretched. Then Crane retreated, but not before promising to return. Inside the cabin, Clara's hands shook. Silas did not miss it. "He won't stop," she said. "He wants the land. He always has." "I'll help you," Silas said. "Why?" "Because you took in a boy who wasn't yours. Because you gave shelter to a stranger. Because you looked at me, like I wasn't just what I'd been." That night, Clara found the letter hidden with Thomas's money. It was proof. Proof that Thomas had been involved in gun running with Crane. Proof that Crane was dangerous. Proof that Clara was now standing in the middle of something far bigger than herself. She hid it again, heart racing. She did not tell Silas. Fear has a way of choosing silence. The knock came the next morning, lighter this time. A bounty hunter stood at the gate. "Looking for Silas Maddox," he said, holding up a poster. $200. Clara's world tilted. Silas stepped out beside her. "Yes," he said. "It's true." He told her everything. The mining company. The violence. The night he refused to burn down a homestead with children inside. The man who shot first. The death that followed him like a shadow. She listened. Then she did something Silas never expected. She believed him. "Everyone deserves a chance," she said, "including you." The bounty hunter gave them 48 hours. That night, Clara faced a choice: stay safe or fight. She chose to fight. She went to Crane alone. He trapped her. Silas found her note too late, when the storm that followed was not made of snow. It was made of gunfire, broken doors, and men finally standing up to monsters who believed themselves untouchable. Silas came through the roof. Sheriff Burke came through the back. Crane fell. Victor Crane fell harder. Clara ran into Silas's arms in the middle of chaos. Alive. The bounty was withdrawn. Silas Maddox was a free man. But freedom came with a final choice. Who would he be now that he could stop running? As dawn broke over the plains, Silas looked at the small cabin, at the woman standing beside him, at the boy watching from the porch. Home was no longer a place. It was a promise. And promises, he had learned, were worth staying for. Silas always knew the quiet would not last. The morning after Crane was taken away, the land felt different. Too still. The kind of stillness that came before something decided to break. Silas stood outside the cabin, hands resting on the fence he had rebuilt, watching the horizon like a man who had learned the hard way that peace was fragile. Clara stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee in each hand. She handed one to him without a word. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. Jake ran past them, chasing one of the chickens, laughing so hard he tripped over his own boots. Silas watched him with something tight in his chest. A life like that deserved protecting. Sheriff Burke rode out just before noon. "They're moving Crane to Denver tomorrow," he said. "He won't be coming back." "And Victor?" Clara asked. "Alive," Burke said. "Angry, but alive." Silas nodded. That was enough. When Burke left, Clara turned to Silas. "You can go now," she said quietly. "No one's hunting you anymore." Silas looked at her. Really looked. At the woman who had faced down men with guns and power. At the widow who had trusted a stranger in a storm. At the person who had seen the worst of him and stayed. "I know," he said. "I don't want to." The words settled between them like truth, finally spoken aloud. That night, they sat by the fire. No secrets left, no lies to hide behind. Clara broke the silence. "I was married before I ever learned what love was supposed to feel like," she said. "I thought cold was normal. I thought silence meant safety." Silas listened. "I don't want that again," she continued. "I don't want fear dressed up as comfort." "You won't have it," Silas said. "Not with me." She believed him. Later, when the fire burned low, Clara stood and reached for his hand. "Come with me." He followed. He was careful, gentle, as if strength, real strength, was knowing exactly how much not to use. When he whispered the words in her ear, low and certain, her breath caught. "You've never had a man my size," he murmured. "Let me show you how it's done." What he showed her was not force. It was patience. It was care. It was the kind of closeness that made her realize how little she had been given before, and how much more she deserved. When dawn came, it came soft. Weeks passed. Silas stayed. He planted new fence posts, helped Jake with his lessons, walked into town without looking over his shoulder for the first time in years. But freedom had a way of asking questions. One evening, Silas sat at the table, turning a ring between his fingers. Simple. Gold. He had bought it in town without telling anyone. Clara watched him from the stove. "What's wrong?" she asked. He stood. "I don't know how to be halfway," he said. "I don't know how to stay without committing." He dropped to one knee. Clara froze. "I've been a monster," he said. "I've been a hired fist. I've been a man no one trusted. But with you, with Jake, I found something I didn't know I was allowed to want." Her hands shook. "I can't promise perfection," he continued, "but I can promise you these hands will build, not destroy. They'll protect. They'll love you. Every day I draw breath." He looked up. "Clara Whitmore, will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision. "Yes," she said. "Yes!" Jake burst into the room like he had been waiting for the moment. "Does this mean he's my pa now?" Silas laughed, a real laugh, and pulled the boy into his arms. "If you'll have me." The wedding was small. The church was full. Maggie cried loudly. Sheriff Burke stood stiff, but proud. Even Jeb Rollins showed up clean-shaven and quiet, tipping his hat with respect. When Clara walked down the aisle, Silas forgot every bad thing he had ever done. All he could see was the future walking toward him. They built a life the hard way, with work, with honesty, with storms that came and went, but never drove them apart. Years later, Silas stood on the porch of a bigger house, coffee cooling in his hand. Children's laughter drifted through the open door. Clara stood behind him, her arm around his waist, her head resting against his back. "Storm's coming," she said. He smiled. "Let it come." Because this time, they were ready.